Okay, today we're going to attempt to put on a center stand on a 2012 Triumph Tiger 800 XC. It needs a specific kit made for the XC. The normal Tiger 800 and the XC have different kits, so make sure that you have the correct kit for your model Tiger 800. This is an A9778005, and that is the part number for the XC model. Make sure you inventory all your tools, all your parts. Make sure everything that's on the parts list is in the bag. Looks like I have everything, including an extra cloth bag. I have no idea what it's for. One thing I should point out is that the kit comes with a spring assembly. It's a double spring assembly. And when I picked up this kit, they told me about the other spring that was attached to the outside of the package. It's a double spring as well, but if you notice, it's two springs, one inside another, and the outer spring is a lot larger diameter than the other one. This is the one that was originally in the kit. Both of those inner and outer springs look to be the same diameter wire. I could put a mic on the on this newer one, and that outer spring measures. Let me zero my mic out, or my calipers rather. Okay, about 2.44 millimeters is what it's reading, and the inner one is about 1.76 millimeters. So you can see there's a substantial difference between the inner and outer springs. I believe that was a recall because of some problems with the center stands slapping when you're going over rough terrain. So make sure you get the proper spring with your kit. I did notice too there are some differences in the instructions. It shows two bumpers on the center stand itself. It appears as if my kit only came with one bumper, which goes on the upstop bracket there, so if there's differences, don't be surprised. Okay, the first thing they tell you to do is to remove these M10 by 35 millimeter side stand bracket bolts. They take a 14 millimeter socket on the head and a 17 millimeter wrench on the back side. A box end would work. Hopefully it'll get in there. If not, an open end will work. Let's give that a shot. Okay, it's broken free. Nut. First bolt. Set those aside, don't lose them. Looks like I'm going to have to get this thing turned a little bit. There we go. If it looks like they came off too easy, it's because I broke them free prior to starting the video, so make sure you break them free ahead of time. You got the side stand safety switch that is still connected. I'm going to try to prop that over here out of the way just to keep from putting too much tension on the cable. I don't want to rip that wire out. Okay, the next thing they have you do is you're going to put the upstop bracket that goes on the side stand. This is the upstop bracket. They want you to put it on there with the M8 by 10 millimeter screw. It's got a Allen head on it, and I'm going to get that secured on there just a second. But they just want you to put it on there temporarily, not tighten it down. So you're just going to put it in place. If you're looking at it like this, the bracket goes on here like this, and that M8 by 10 millimeter, or I'm sorry, M8 by 14 millimeter screw goes in this hole here. but it just says to loosely secure it with that at this point. So I'm going to install that. Okay, so it's on there, not been tightened down yet, but it's in place. The next thing you're going to do is going to put on the two bolts back in the holes, but this time you're going to only reuse one of the bolts that you took out, the two 35mm long bolts that you took out. You're going to use one of those, which is 35mm, goes in the bottom hole, and the new bolt that comes with it, the 45mm length bolt that it comes with, goes in the upper hole. Just like that. Now this is the back side of those two bolts you just put in your side stand. You got your upper bolt, which is the 45mm length, and the lower bolt sticking out, which is the 35mm length. The spacer that is included with the kit, this round flat washer or thick washer, I would guess you would call it, the spacer, goes on that upper bolt, and we're going to do that here in a second. Okay, this shows that spacer and the nut in the upper bolt going through your side stand and your upstop bracket. You just have them on there temporarily or not completely tightened yet, and you're not going to put a nut on the lower one. That one will be addressed later. The carbon canister here makes access in the back side here a little bit tight. I guess you can take off the carbon canister, and I'm going to attempt to do it without removing it. I may end up having to take it off, but we'll see. But this is where you're at right now, is just to have that upper bolt in the hole with the spacer and nut on there loosely. Okay, the next thing they tell you to do is to put the upstop bumper, it's a rubber bumper that comes in your kit, in the upstop bracket. There's a hole right here on the back side. You want to push it up through the hole and then make sure that it's secured and fully through the top. It feels good, but you want to check it at the top to make sure that the flanges have completely protruded through the top side of the bracket so it doesn't come off. But that's that. The next thing you're going to assemble is the S-bracket. It's got a screw and a compression limiter and a spacer. The screw is an M6 by 25mm. That's what's listed on my parts on my kit. The instructions actually tell you it's 28mm, but it's an M6 by 25mm screw that goes through this end, just like this, goes through that hole, and then the spacer goes on there like that. Okay, the next thing you're going to do, you're going to take the S bracket and the screw and the spacers that you put together just a second ago, and they're going to go back here on the back side of where your brake pedal mounts. There's a welded nut already there for this provision, and here's your oil sight gauge, and right there on the back side of that bracket is the welded nut that's already there to put that bolt into, or that screw for your S bracket. And I'm going to do that here in a second. The screw for the S bracket is a Torx type of head. It's a number 30 Torx screw that it gets fixed with. So we'll get that fixed. Here I'm just showing you that access to the head of that bolt that secures the S bracket is a little bit difficult. I didn't have a bent head Torx bit to put on there. You could use that. I've just used a Torx bit that I had to fit in a 1/4-inch drive screwdriver and a 1/4-inch socket and a quarter-inch drive ratchet to secure it. So whatever you can do to get on there without stripping out that head, number 30 Torx bit, just use that. But it's a little difficult, but it's doable. And when you're done securing that bolt course, the S bracket has to be able to swivel in there, so make sure that you've got it all assembled properly and with the bolt tight, that the S bracket swivels back and forth like it's supposed to. If it gets bound up in there, there's something wrong. You may have pinched it in there incorrectly, so you need to start over and make sure that that flanged bushing that is underneath the head of the bolt is in there in the proper position and it's not pinching this S bracket. But it has to be able to move back and forth like this in order for it to function properly. The next thing that the instructions tell you to do is to put two extra rubber bumpers, and the instructions show you that there's brackets here and here, but my kit did not come with those brackets nor the bumpers to put in them, so I don't know if I have an early kit or a later kit, but mine is a little different than what the instructions say. If yours has it, then put them in there. Next thing you're going to want to do is put some grease on the flanged bushings. These are the bushings that the center stand actually pivots on when it goes up and down. So these outer surfaces of the sleeves are what actually get greased. Don't put any inside on the threads because you don't want these bolts coming out over time from vibration. Just on the outer surfaces, a good quality grease, waterproof grease would be good. The instructions say an NLGI 2 spec grease. Okay, we've got the bushings greased and in place on the center stands. The little roll pins that are in those bushings face outward, so you want to have them facing outward on each side. You can see the little roll pin sticking outward so that it can go into an anti-rotation hole, so that the bushing itself does not pivot when you move the stand up and down, just the stand turning about the flanged bushing. We're back up underneath the bike next to the side stand. The lower bolt that secures the side stand and is going to secure the flanged sleeve on the left side for the center stand, I've pulled it back so that you can see, hopefully, on the bracket that's on the bike itself, there is a little hole for that roll pin in that flange sleeve to go into. As you're looking at it right now, it's on the far side of that hole. So you have to make sure that that roll pin goes in that little hole to keep that flange sleeve from rotating once you get the side stand up in there. And then the lower bolt is going to thread into that flange sleeve itself. After further consideration, I decided to pull the one Allen screw that holds the carbon canister to the bracket. All you have to do is take the one Allen screw out, and you can pull it aft and drop it down. It gives you a whole lot more room, and that's the hole that the flange sleeve goes into, that the center stand pivots on the left side. So it makes it a lot easier to have that canister out of the way. I considered prying on it, but I didn't want to crush the canister. I may or may not leave the canister on, but for now I'm going to leave it on. But I recommend you take that screw out of the bracket right there on a carbon canister, and it gives you a whole lot more room. That's what it looks like at the back side once you got the flange sleeve secured with the lower bolt and the upper bolt with the nut and the spacer washer. About ready to torque those bolts and that one Allen screw that is actually securing the upstop bracket to the side stand bracket that we put on temporarily earlier. Over on the right side, I've gone ahead and got it started. That is the 10mm Allen bolt. Let me move my light around here. 10mm Allen bolt in the other flange sleeve, and it's got its roll pin in the hole that's already drilled in the frame for it. So I'm going to go ahead and torque the left side, and then come over here and torque the right side, and then put the carbon canister back on with the one Allen screw that I removed. Then we'll be ready to put the spring on after that. Okay, these two bolts here, the 45mm length bolt and the 35mm length bolt, both get torqued to 45 Newton meters. The screw on the back side, the M8 by 14mm screw, it's an Allen head, and it gets torqued to 18 Newton meters. According to my torque wrench, 45 Newton meters is about 33 foot-pounds, roughly. It's not a real close scale on there. And then 18 Newton meters is approximately, it looks to be about 14 or 15 foot-pounds. Go ahead and get those upper bolts, the upper and lower bolts rather, we'll get those torqued. Remember that upper bolt has the nut on the top side. You gotta get your open end wrench in there. Ready to torque that. Okay, that's torqued. The lower one, it goes into the flanged sleeve that is threaded, so you don't have to put a wrench on it anymore. Okay, so both the main bolts are torqued. I'm going to use my calibrated torque wrench hand to secure the M8x14 screw that holds the upstop bracket. Just tighten it. I think anybody with more than a week's worth of mechanical experience could probably tighten this securely without stripping it. Okay, over here is your right side pivot point for your center stand. It's got the Allen headed bolt that goes into the flange sleeve. It also gets torqued to 45 Newton meters. I did not have a metric Allen wrench to fit that. I do have a 5/16 which fit in there just right, so that's what I'm using. If that's what you have on hand, you can use that. It wasn't loose in there, it fit actually quite nicely. Okay, everything is torqued. That mounts the center stand to the bike. I've also put the one Allen screw back in the back of the charcoal canister. The front side just has two plastic pegs that go into some rubber bushings, so this is the only fastener you have to remove to get this out of the way, and it does make it much easier, so I recommend doing that. As easy as it is to take off and put back on, it makes it a whole lot easier to get this flanged bushing here with that roll pin into the hole of the frame. Otherwise you're having to pry that over to the side, and it's just much easier to take this out. So everything's been torqued. One last check you may want to do, excuse my camera work here, trying to hold the light too, just make sure it pivots up and down properly, indicating that you've got everything oriented correctly and there's no binding. It goes right up to the upstop there, and the next thing we're going to do is put on the spring, and we'll see how that goes. I've heard it can be a little bit difficult, but we'll see how it goes. One thing I read about under the installation about these center stands is a lot of people are complaining about how hard it is to get the return spring installed. I'm going to suggest this tool here. It's a brake spring removal and installation tool. It's a common tool used for drum brake repair. One end is for removing brake springs and the other end is for installing brake springs. So I'm going to try that to see if that aids in getting that spring on without much difficulty. I've taken a piece of scrap wire and wired the center stand in the up position where I'll have the least amount of stretch that I'll have to do for the spring. So I'm going to give this a shot. Okay, this is the brake installation tool, brake spring installation tool. I'm going to use this end, and it's going to help you guide these spring ends onto the pin here that they attach to. You put this on here like this. You want to get that hooked over the end, and that's the whole point. You're going to have to try to guide this into place as you go. And that's the whole point of this tool, is to make that job a little bit easier. hopefully less blood blisters and bloody knuckles. But that seems to work pretty well, so I recommend this tool here.